Chapter 416. The advisor was stunned for a moment before cupping his hands in acknowledgement. Fu Xiaoyi shifted his gaze. Since the game had already begun, the day of conquering the world was just around the corner. It was imperative to recruit more talents in the shortest time possible. Shen Xian left the capital early the next morning. When he left the capital, it was early in the morning and the sky was not even bright. Shen Xian had sneaked away. One reason was that he did not want to make things difficult for those colleagues that he had good relations with. If they were to send him off, it would be equivalent to going against Emperor Wen Hui. The heart of an emperor was temperamental. It would not be good if he vented his anger because of this. Secondly, the Shaochun city was thousands of mountains and rivers away from the Ding capital. Thus the earlier one traveled, the earlier one would arrive. However, even if they galloped at full speed, it would still take them more than half a year to arrive. Even though Shen Xian was taken in by the Shen family's army and only the frontline people were left, he still had a group of confidants in private. In addition to Shen Qiu's subordinates, Mo Qing and Ah Qi, he was not afraid of encountering any danger. Their journey had been pretty good. Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian were initially worried that Shen Miao's body would not be able to withstand such a long journey and feared that she would feel uncomfortable in the middle of the journey. Who knew that Shen Miao did not even utter a single word of tiredness. Even Shen Xian kept on praising, "Jiao Jiao is indeed my daughter." Which female family in the Ding capital would have such tenacity? Luo Shuiyan rolled her eyes at him but felt even more guilty towards Shen Miao. She was a pampered girl, but she had to follow them and suffer hardships. Jingzhe was holding on to the curtain of the carriage. Because it was her first time traveling far, she was somewhat surprised. One moment she pointed at the birds in the sky. The next moment she pointed at the hares in the forest and screamed. Seeing Shen Miao's calm look, she asked curiously, "Why does young lady not find it fresh? These things can't be found in the city." With that said, Guyu also knocked on Shen Miao's face and probed, "Young lady, look at it, and there is not a bit of nostalgia." Luo Shuiyan, who was sitting in the carriage, was stunned. To leave the hometown that one had lived in for more than 10 years and go to a place that one had never heard of. The Shaochun city was definitely not as prosperous as the Ding capital, and one was unfamiliar with the people and the place. Any young lady would at this time show their attachment and reluctance to leave their hometown. However, Shen Miao was very calm from the beginning to the end. Sometimes, she even looked a little lively. Brisk? What was there to be happy about leaving one's home? Feeling Luo Shuiyan's gaze, Shen Miao was slightly surprised for a moment before smiling. Looking at the scenery outside the carriage, she said, "Father, mother, and eldest brother are by my side. What is there to miss? Even if one were to stay in the Ding capital, one would not have any relatives and it would not be considered as a home." Hearing this, Luo Shuiyan's heart ached, thinking that she had seen the ugly faces of the Shen family when she came back this time. For so many years, she had thrown Shen Miao into that family and thought that she was living well, but now it seemed like a big joke. Shen Miao most likely did not treat those people as family, otherwise she would not have said such words. Thinking of this, Luo Shuiyan pulled Shen Miao into her embrace and said guiltily, "Correct. In the future Jiao Jiao will be together with father, mother, and eldest brother. No one would dare to bully you." Shen Miao nestled in Luo Shuiyan's embrace and lowered her eyes to hide the trace of coldness in them. How could this be the first time he had to leave his hometown and travel alone? In her previous life, when she went to the Qin state as a hostage, the mountains were high and the rivers were long. When she brought along her trusted maids, how many of them died in foreign lands? The scenery at that time was just like now. It was obviously very blurry, but one could clearly remember the feeling of that moment. From the Ding capital to the Qin country, and from the Qin country back to the Ding capital, both roads were very bleak. It was a pity that she thought that she was doing it for the sake of righteousness and for the common people of the world, but did not know how ridiculous and lame she was in the eyes of everyone. Chapter 417. Now she did not leave alone, and when she returns, she would not be alone. The mountain road was long, and unknowingly the sky had turned dark. Because it was a mountain road, there were no inns on the mountain, and one could only lodge at a farmer's house. Fortunately, that farmer's family had a warm-hearted temperament and warmly received everyone. They even cooked a lot of food and wine. Because they had to hurry on with their journey, Xian and the rest did not dare to drink alcohol as they were afraid that drinking would cause trouble and delay the next day's departure. It was Shen Miao who did not know if it was because her mood was good or because the plum blossom wine that the farmer's family brewed was sweet and intoxicating that after drinking a few cups, her cheeks turned into a peach color. Why did Jiao Jiao drink so much? Luo Shuiyin initially did not notice, but when she saw it clearly, she could not help but turn pale with fright. Seeing Shen Miao's hand supporting her cheek with a drowsy look, she quickly reached out to check her head. Most likely older sister does not know the power of this wine. The female owner of the farmer's family smiled. The plum blossom wine that we brew ourselves has a sweet taste, but the after effect is strong. Our family's girl often drinks too much and would be drunk. But one would be fine after a sleep and would not feel dizzy the next day. For a need not worry. Luo Shuiyin then felt relieved. Xinxiu looked at Shen Miao's somewhat drunk look and felt it was funny. Did not think that younger sister would also get drunk one day. Really interesting. When Xinxiu returned this time, he saw a calm and gentle Shen Miao. She was so mature that Xinxiu would sometimes have the illusion that Shen Miao was the older sister. Sometimes he would miss the Shen Miao of the past. Even though she was willful and impolite, she still had the temperament that a young lady should have. Now looking at her appearance, it made Xinxiu recall the Shen Miao of the past and unknowingly felt some familiarity. Brat. Shen Exen kicked Xinxiu. Your younger sister is already drunk to this extent, and you still make trouble. Xinxiu quickly stuck out his tongue and pretended to be afraid as he begged for mercy. The whole family, including the farmer's family, were all lively and happy. Where was the disappointment and helplessness of leaving one's hometown? Shen Miao's hands supported her chin as she squinted at the scene in front. Even though this plum blossom wine was intoxicating, she was still somewhat sober. He was indeed very happy today. Everything went according to the plan. In fact, other than letting Shen Xian stay away from the whirlpool of the Ding capital, it was also because there would be a smallpox outbreak in the Ding capital in a year's time. Even though nothing happened in the previous lifetime, she was not willing to let her family take any risks at all. Staying away from the Ding capital meant staying away from danger. Even if he wanted revenge, he had to protect his family first. The lively dinner lasted until late at night before dispersing. The enthusiastic owner of the farm arranged enough rooms for the few of them. Originally, Luo Shuiyin wanted to share a room with Shen Miao, but Shen Miao insisted on staying in the room next to the wall of the farm and even had to sleep alone. It was a separate room, and it was far away from the others. If they moved in, they would be separated from Luo Shuiyin and the others. Shen Xian initially felt that it was not good, and if there was danger, he feared that he would not be able to rush over to rescue, but he did not know what was wrong with Shen Miao that she insisted on staying in that room even though she was drunk. When the mistress of the farmer's family saw this, she smiled and said, "Sister, you probably want to see the flowers outside the wall? The flowers are very beautiful under the snow, and all young ladies like it. For a need not worry. Even though our place is small, there are no bandits or robbers. If you are worried about sister, it is all right to set up a tent outside and find a few more guards." Only then did everyone realize that when they opened the window of the house against the courtyard wall, they could see a large snow-white garden. There were still winter plum blossoms in the garden that had yet to wither. Under the clear moonlight, the shadows of the blossoms swayed on the snowy ground. It was a very beautiful scene. Xinxiu was angry and funny at the same time and pinched Shen Miao's nose. "Delicate bag. No wonder you are called Jiao Jiao. You are drunk and still looking forward to a place with good scenery." Chapter 418. Luo Shuiyin hit down Xinxiu's hand and said angrily, "Do not move around." She then looked at the somewhat confused drunk Shen Miao and shook her head, "Not willing to sleep with me and still want to sleep at such a far place. Let him Qing, Qi, and the rest set up a tent outside the courtyard for the night. Jingzha and Gu Yu will come out after serving young lady to change." This farmer's house was not like the previous residence in the Ding capital, as there was a bedroom and an outer room that allowed Jingzha and Gu Yu to sleep on the small couch in the outer room. Luo Shuiyin and Shen Xian were not harsh people, and there was no reason for Jingzha and Gu Yu to sleep on the floor to serve Shen Miao. Thinking that this farmer's house was not big and with Qi, Qing, and the rest guarding outside, there would not be any problem. Jingzhe and Guyu helped Shin Miao to change her clothes and washed her face before leaving the house. Mo Qing, Ah Qi, and the rest who had set up the tent in the courtyard also prepared to take turns to keep watch. Jingzhe and Guyu went up to warn them again before leaving. In that beautiful little room, there was only Shen Miao left alone. And Shen Miao, who was supported by Jingzhe to climb up the couch, suddenly climbed up from the couch. The aftereffects of the plum blossom wine finally surged up at this moment, and Shen Miao's clear eyes were in a state of chaos. She swayed as she stood up and wanted to walk towards the window, but she stumbled and almost knocked into the corner of the table and fell down. In the darkness, a pair of strong arms held her up, and one could vaguely smell the faint fragrance of the other party. A familiar voice sounded beside her ears with a hint of ridicule. Teske, actually pouncing onto another's body. Shin Miao took the opportunity to wrap her arms around his waist to make herself stand more stable, but did not realize that this action of hers made the latter's body stiffen. After a moment, there was a chi sound and a flame sprang up. That person did not know where to find a match and lit the oil lamp in the room. The windows of the farmer's house were all wooden carvings. Those were real wooden carvings, and there was not even a layer of white paper. Even if there was a lamp in the room, one would not be able to see it from the outside. Thus, the few people in the courtyard did not notice any abnormalities in the room. Under the blurry light, he was able to see the man's facial features clearly. Snow-white fox fur coat, dark red embroidered clothes, red lips, white teeth, a pair of black eyes like peach blossom. The embroidered clothes in the night had a graceful bearing. If it was not Xie Jingxing, who else could it be? Shin Miao was surprised for a moment and said, Xie Jingxing? When she said this, her body became heavy and she accidentally leaned against Xie Jingxing, almost hugging him. Xie Jingxing frowned. Such a strong smell of alcohol. How much did you drink? He looked at Shin Miao and said with some disdain, I sent you off with good intentions, but who knew that I would meet a drunkard? You're the one who's drunk. Shin Miao immediately retorted, All right, you know me and still talk back to me. It seems that you are not drunk, Xie Jingxing said as he helped Shen Miao to the couch. Then, he brought the lamp closer to him. Under the dim light, Shen Miao was wearing a plain white inner garment, and her hair was disheveled as she looked over ignorantly. It was completely different from her usual astute and calm appearance, and she really had the appearance of a delicate and pitiful young lady. Xie Jingxing thought for a moment, and finally could not hold it back and fiercely pinched her face. Shin Miao glared at him angrily. It was rare to see her with such a childish look, and Xie Jingxing felt that it was interesting. He only thought that Shin Miao was drunk, and as the saying goes, wine spits out the truth. Perhaps he would be able to ask something. Who am I? Xie Jingxing, Shin Miao quickly answered. Know what kind of person Xie Jingxing is? Shin Miao stared at him and slowly frowned but did not speak. Xie Jingxing felt that she was looking at him strangely and thought that this girl was cursing him in her heart. Who knew that Shin Miao suddenly smiled and said, A wonderful and stunning character. Chapter 419. Xie Jingxing. He stared at Shin Miao thoughtfully and asked, Are you pretending to be drunk? The little marquis of the Xie family, a young talent, an eternal character, a heroic age. The words at the back gradually became softer, as if she could not remember. Xie Jingxing initially had some suspicions, but when he saw that Shin Miao did not seem to be pretending, he felt somewhat strange and raised his brows. Did not think that in your heart you were so satisfied with me? He leaned closer and teased. Could it be that you admire me? Shin Miao reached out and pushed his head away. Xie Jingxing was somewhat speechless. If it was on normal days, it would be very interesting to tease Shin Miao. But now that Shin Miao was so drunk that even the eternal character evaluation came out, it would be very boring to tease her now. He said, Originally wanted to see you one last time. Since you are this drunk, forget it. Let us part here. He was about to leave after speaking, but who knew that with a plop sound, Shen Miao fell from the couch to the ground again. Xie Jingxing first wanted to help Shen Miao up, but then stopped and crossed his arms at his chest as he stood calmly at the side. He watched Shen Miao struggling on the ground, and after admiring for a while, he then said, One should really let you see your current appearance. Shen Miao was dizzy from drinking, and her body was soft, so how would she be able to stand up? She flopped on the ground for a long time, but to no avail. Xie Jingxing finally could not stand it anymore and mercifully helped her up before sitting on the couch. He then heard Shen Miao saying, "Li Gonggong, Bin Gong want to see the fireworks." In the quiet night, Shen Miao's words were exceptionally clear. "Li Gonggong, Bin Gong want to see the fireworks." The charcoal fire in the room seemed to have solidified. Xie Jingxing's originally curled lips slowly lowered down, and his pair of peach blossom eyes were no longer filled with a romantic smile. He slightly squatted down, and his line of sight was at the same level as Shen Miao, who was sitting on the couch. It was a gentle action, but his eyes gradually turned cold. He said, "What did you say?" Shen Miao opened her eyes and looked at him. Under the warm light, her eyes became clearer, and in those clear eyes, there was a hint of drunkenness, which made the young and inexperienced young lady suddenly have a few more womanly charm. She delicately and haughtily stretched out a hand, as if to place it on the hand of a palace servant. She ordered, uniquely, "I want to see the fireworks. Go and call the crown prince and princess over." Crown prince? Princess? Xie Jingxing stared at Shen Miao in front of him. When he smiled, he was as moving as the spring flowers and autumn moon. When he didn't smile, he was as dangerous as a silent abyss. Anyone who looked at him would feel like they were being mocked. He looked at Shen Miao, and as he looked, he suddenly chuckled. Even though there was a smile on his face, there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. He gently hooked up Shen Miao's chin, and when he did such a lecherous action, it was graceful and natural, so gentle that it made one drown in his dark eyes. He asked, "Shen Miao, do you want to be the Empress?" Shen Miao blinked at him and said, "That was originally mine." "Yours?" "Bungong's." Xie Jingxing slowly tightened his fingers, and Shen Miao frowned in dissatisfaction as she felt pain on her chin. "Little girl, you already have the ambition to be the Empress at such a young age." His tone was unclear, but his eyes were dangerous. A woman with ambition is the most beautiful. But you are still not a woman. Shen Miao also looked at him. Under the bright moonlight, the snowy shadows, the swaying plum blossoms, the two people facing each other. It should have been a romantic scene with beautiful flowers and full moon. But the atmosphere of danger and ambiguity was overwhelming, mixed with probing and danger. She was like a young lady who was raised pampered. If it was an ordinary female, when she grew older, she would only worry about marrying a good husband. But she had been patiently planning step by step, scheming against the world behind her back. Even though one had guessed that she had ambition, but when one really heard it, one could not help but be surprised. Chapter 420. That little girl was covered in thorns. From an idiot to a chess player, from the eye-catching daughter of a general's wife to a noble daughter who had lost her power, it seemed that she had never changed. It was this docile yet ferocious gaze that was filled with nobility and pride. She was born with the bearing of someone who had been in a high position for many years. Her words, uniquely, "I want to go see the fireworks," were long and lingering, like a bell ringing in the quiet night, ringing in people's hearts. Even if it was a dream, her aura could be said to be that of an empress. Right now, she was still a little girl. After a few more years, her beauty and elegance would be hard to conceal. Perhaps she would really have the bearing of a motherly model of the world. Xie Jingxing slowly released the hand that was holding Shen Miao's chin and glanced at her with difficulty. Pausing, he was about to get up and leave but heard Shen Miao muttering, "Xiao Lizi, go and bring Bin Gong's cloak over. Bin Gong is cold." In an instant, he changed from uniquely to little Li. Xie Jingxing's originally complicated emotions were stirred up by her, and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, "You order me? Cold?" Shen Miao looked at him aggrievedly. Xie Jingxing took a deep breath and suppressed the thought of picking Shen Miao up and beating her up. He took off his cloak and threw it on Shen Miao. Shen Miao wrapped his cloak and gave him a smile. "Later Bin Gong will reward you with a few bolts of satin." His favor was boundless. Xie Jingxing looked at her expressionlessly. "Many thanks for Nangyang's love. This official will take his leave." Just as he was about to leave, Shen Miao grabbed his sleeve. The Shen Miao tonight was too abnormal. Xie Jingxing had never dreamt that the drunk Shen Miao would be like this. He thought that he could take advantage of the drunkenness to bully Shin Miao, but in the end, it seemed that he was the one being bullied. The dignified young master of the Xie family was being ordered around like a eunuch. Eunuch Li? Little Li? Shin Miao pulled Xie Jingxing's sleeves and pulled him down until Xie Jingxing squatted down and was at eye level with her before she was satisfied. She released her hand and grabbed Xie Jingxing's collar. Xie Jingxing was baffled by Shin Miao's actions. One could only hear Shan Miao muttering to herself. Originally in the previous dynasty, when the princess was widowed, the male attendants were kept. Since His Majesty doesn't treat me well, I'll treat it as my husband's death and find a male companion. When Xie Jingxing heard the first part of the sentence, he couldn't understand it, but when he heard the latter part, he found it unbelievable. He stared at Shan Miao. In your dream, is it a disfavored and crippled empress? It's not falling out of favor. When Shin Miao heard it, she glared at him. Xie Jingxing nodded his head and said lazily, cursing the death of one's husband after falling out of favor. You must be the poison empress. But you look really good. Shin Miao suddenly said, are you the new gigolo? Xie Jingxing, that princess of the previous dynasty, found a handsome male, and Bin Gong had seen the portrait before, but felt that he was not as beautiful as you. Shin Miao said, if you follow Bin Gong will ensure that you will not have to worry about food and clothing in the lower half of your life. Xie Jingxing was initially shocked by Shin Miao's words of gigolo, but when he heard the latter sentence, he was completely stunned. This is being treated as a male pet? He was still in a daze when he saw the hand that was grabbing his collar suddenly exerted strength, and there was a soft thing that stuck to him. The cold little mouth licked his lips, and after a nibble, a mouthful of sweet plum blossom wine came to his face. From now on, you are Bin Gong's person. Shin Miao released her hand and looked at him with a dignified smile. When Xie Jingxing recovered to his senses, he only had one thought. He wanted to strangle this female in front of him. But just at this moment, a whistle was suddenly heard from outside. That was the signal given by his people. Emoqing and the rest had noticed the movements. Xie Jingxing gritted his teeth and glanced at Shin Miao before flying out. Qi opened the door but saw that there was nothing inside. He scratched his head and said, there is no one. Most likely there was a mistake. Emoqing frowned. In the snow where the plum blossoms were swaying, there was a bit of uneasiness on the dark red-robed handsome youth's face. When the middle-aged man beside saw the situation, he could not help but ask, Master seems to be somewhat uneasy. Just now, what happened inside? He only went to bid farewell to the young lady of the Shin family, so why was there something wrong when he came out? The meaning in the red-clad youth's eyes was unclear. Tai, I look like. Tai was puzzled. Like what? Forget it. He gritted his teeth and replied, go. Chapter 421. In the early morning of the second day, the sky had just brightened when Jingzhe and Guyu came over to help Shan Miao wake up. When they entered the room, they saw Shin Miao sleeping on the couch, and the blanket was missing and her body was covered with a fox fur coat. Both of them suddenly turned pale with fright. Yesterday when she left, she did not leave behind any fox fur coat. So where did this fur coat come from? Jingzhe woke Shin Miao up, and after Shin Miao woke up, she was also at a loss when she saw the fox fur coat. Even though the after-effect of the plum blossom wine was strong, it was like what the female owner of the household said. One would not feel dizzy the next day. It was true that one's head was not dizzy, but one was unable to remember anything that happened last night. She did not even know why she wanted to stay in this room alone. Guyu took that snow-white fox fur coat and said, young lady, where did this fox fur coat come from? Shin Miao took the fox fur coat and shook her head. Young lady's clothes boxes are all here. Could it be that young lady was drunk and dug it out from the boxes? Jingzhe asked tentatively, but why is it that it is the first time seeing this fox fur coat? They did not think in any other direction. After all, Shin Miao was perfectly fine staying here, and there were guards guarding outside last night, so nothing had happened. It was just that this fox fur coat came out of nowhere. Shin Miao said, take it out and ask the farmer if it is their family's. Upon seeing the owner of the household, the owner shook his head when he heard it. Our family does not have such a good fox fur. Most likely elder sister had misremembered. Shincho took the fox fur coat and said, This fox fur coat does not look like an ordinary item. Younger sister, where did this come from? One fear that it is worth a lot of money. The workmanship also looks gorgeous, but the tailoring is not very good. One feel that it is too big for you to wear. Shen Miao took the fox fur coat, and her heart was very puzzled. She really did not remember when she had such a cloak. But hearing that Shen Xiu said that it was worth a lot of money, she naturally took it back and lied without a change in expression. Thinking about it, it seemed that it was bought in the Ding capital. Jingzhe, keep it. Jingzhe was thinking hard about when did Shen Miao bought the cloak, and when she heard her say that, she did not bother to ponder and immediately said yes before keeping the cloak into the box. Shen Miao shook her head. No matter where did the cloak came from, but in this trip to the Shaochun city, one feared that there would be a lot of places that needed money. Now that Shenxian was not like the past. If there was a day where he was stretched to make ends meet, he could still exchange this cloak for a lot of money to spend. Thinking of this, those messy conjectures became dispensable. Time always passed very quickly. The different state of mind determined the different scenery one would see. Even though the Shaochun city was far away and the road was filled with high mountains and meandering rivers, it was bumpy and muddy. Even though they were travel-worn, Shen Miao did not say that she was tired. Those soldiers in the front of the Shen family's army who were regarded as burdens followed Shenxian's remaining trusted aides, and because of the hardships they shared along the way, they became closer to everyone. Leaving the capital in the second month of spring, at the beginning of August, she finally arrived at the Shaochun city. The Shaochun city was located at the border of Mingqi and was a very small city. If one were to talk about the highest official in the city, it would be the garrison general Luo Sui, Grand General Luo. All along, Luo Sui had been protecting the people of the Shaochun city to live and work in peace and contentment, but because it was too far away from the Ding capital, everyone was well aware that this kind of job was not a good one. In addition, after so many years, the Luo family's army was almost scattered, and the Luo family only had some prestige in the Shaochun city. When the guards at the city gates saw Luo Shuiyin taking out the Luo family's identity token, they were suddenly in awe and sent someone to pass the news to the Luo family. The Shaochun city was only such a big place, and when the Shen family brought a group of people into the city, it was immediately noticed by the surrounding commoners. One after another, they went forward to inquire and found out that it was the Luo family's married daughter who brought her family over. Immediately there was a wave of liveliness. Chapter 422. Jingzhe quietly lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked at the outerwear before saying to Shen Miao, "Young lady, this is the Shaochun city." Shen Miao glanced outside. The Shaochun city was not as unbearable as what the noble females in the Ding capital said. Even though it was a small place at the borders, it looked lively. It was just that the sandstorm was a little strong. Because of the sandstorm, the women's skin was slightly darker, and they were not as delicate as the women in the capital. Perhaps it was because of the open culture of the people. They were all lively and quick-witted. Some of them even looked a little mischievous, making people feel that they were full of vitality. There were peddlers and stalls along the streets, so there was no shortage of goods. The more Jingzhe looked, the happier she became, and the original apprehension was swept away. "Young lady, the Shaochun city and the Ding capital are not much different. Does Jiao Jiao like it here?" Luo Shuiyin asked uneasily. What she was most afraid of was that Shen Miao would not be used to living here. Luo Shuiyin grew up in the Shaochun city, so of course there was no problem. Shen Xiu and Shen Xian were military generals who had been on the battlefield and would not say anything more. She was just a spoiled daughter that she needed to worry about. Shen Miao smiled. "It's good here." Only then did Luo Shuiyin feel relieved. She smiled and said, "Let's go to your maternal grandfather's house. You haven't seen your grandfather since you became a governor. You have 2 uncles, 3 older brothers, and 1 older sister. They're all good people. I'm sure they'll like you very much when you get there." Luo Foreign died early, and Luo Sui had been a widower for so many years. The Luo family had 3 siblings, and Luo Shuiyin was the youngest. When Shen Miao was born, the Luo family came all the way to the Ding capital to see her once, but after that, because the Shaochun city was too far away and one could not leave this side, Shen Miao and the Luo family had never met before. In the previous lifetime, Shen Miao's impression of the Luo family was also very vague, and now that she heard Luo Shuiyin saying it, She also smiled. At this moment, many people had already gathered in front of the Luo family's gate. There were commoners who came to watch the show, and of course, there were also people from the Luo family. Luo Sui stood at the very front, and behind him were two middle-aged couples. Behind the couple were three youths and a young girl. The youths all had upright features and were awe-inspiring. Although they were still young, they had the demeanor of a valiant general. The girl's skin was a healthy wheat color. She had a pair of almond-shaped eyes and a small diamond-shaped mouth. One look and you could tell that she was a shrewish person. She pulled the youth beside her and asked, "Big brother, what kind of person do you think my cousin is?" The young man who was stopped by her had a good temperament. He said warmly, "He should be a good person." "What do you mean by not bad? Can't you make it clearer?" The young girl was unrelenting. "Is she pretty? You see those Ding capital young ladies that came to our Shaochun city. Each and every one of them are very beautiful, but their temperament is so delicate that it makes one feel disgusted. Moreover, the official's young lady that came to the Shaochun city as a guest last year said that she knew Biao younger sister. She lowered her voice, but because of her crisp voice, it could still be heard. One heard that Biao younger sister's reputation in the Ding capital is not good." "Tanner!" A loud shout interrupted the young female's words, and it was Luo Sui who opened his mouth and stared fiercely at that young female called Tanner. The young female quickly straightened her body and stuck out her tongue and no longer spoke. She did not speak, but a slightly younger and more lively lad came over and pulled Tanner's hand, saying, "Grandpa is so biased. This cousin has not come yet, but he is already protecting her like this. I want to see what kind of person this Biao younger sister is." Shin Xian had been fighting in the northwest region all year round and would pass by the Shaochun city whenever he went to the northwest border, thus he would come over every year. Shin Xiao and the Luo family also knew each other. If one were to say that the person that the Luo family was most interested in was Shen Miao, whom they had never seen since she was born. The world was so big that it could be said that it was big, but it could also be said that it was small. In the Shaochun city, there would occasionally be some officials who were demoted or passing by, so they would know a thing or two about the rumors in the Ding capital. What kind of person was Shin Miao? Regarding the rumors of the idiot D daughter, it was also famous in the Shaochun city. Chapter 423. Hearing of one's reputation was not as good as seeing. Today one could finally see it. There were so many commoners surrounding outside, and speaking of which, the majority of them wanted to see what Shin Miao looked like. Just as this young female and that youth were whispering, a line of horse carriages slowly came over, and the ones riding at the front were Shin Xian and Shin Xiao. Behind them was a group of soldiers. "Father!" Shin Xian got off the horse, and Shin Xiao quickly followed up and ran to Luo Sui with a smile. "Waizu?" Luo Sui's gaze swept across the father and son pair before landing on the horse carriage. After all, it was not nice to see too much, as Luo Sui wanted to see his own granddaughter the most. A slightly plump foreign with a friendly smile said, "Youngest Gu and Jiao Jiao should be in the horse carriage. One fear that they are tired after walking for such a long time." Just as the words were spoken, one saw the curtain of the horse carriage being lifted, and Jingzhe and Guyu helped Luo Shuiyin down. Luo Shuiyin then reached out to the horse carriage, and a young female came down. That young female bent down from the horse carriage, and when she raised her head, a pretty face was revealed. When she turned her head back, Luo Shuiyin was already holding her hand and walking forward. "Jiao Jiao, let us go home." The young female called Tanner opened her mouth but did not speak. The Shaochun city was windy and dry, thus the young females had dark skin, and it was rare to see fair skin, not to mention such a white and juicy young female. That young female's brows were very delicate, and because of her snow-white skin, it was even more picturesque. Black eyebrows, black eyes, a small nose, and rosy lips. However, the most surprising thing was her temperament. She was held by Luo Shuiyin and looked like a very delicate young female, but under Luo Shuiyin's valiant and heroic bearing, she did not seem as weak as the iris flower. Instead, she looked more dignified and noble, as if she was the leader. The surrounding commoners and the Luo family were somewhat dumbfounded. One's bearing was important when looking at a person, but a woman's aptitude was the most important and beauty was secondary. This Shin family's young female's aptitude was more captivating than her appearance. She followed Luo Shuiyin step by step until she was in front of Luo Sui. Luo Sui was tall and had deep eyes and a high nose. Compared to Shun Xian's boorishness, he appeared more serious and unreasonable. He frowned as he stared at Shen Miao. With such a cold look, if it was a young lady with less courage, she would have been scared to tears. Moreover, Shen Miao looked like a delicate and noble young lady from the Ding capital, so everyone thought that she would be scared out of her wits. Tanner and the young man beside her raised the corners of their mouths to watch the show. Shen Miao raised her head and looked at Luo Sui. Her brows relaxed and her body was soft. Apparently, she was not nervous because of Luo Sui's reaction. Her eyes were calm, and she even smiled slightly. That kind of attitude of a superior towards a subordinate actually made Luo Sui stunned for a moment. The attitude of the superior towards the inferior? The Luo family in the Shaochun city was in existence like the Lord of the Earth City, so how could there be someone in a higher position? After Luo Sui was stunned for a moment, he suddenly laughed out loud. When she smiled, the nervous people around her were all shocked. Luo Sui patted Shan Miao's head and shouted energetically, "Girl, why did not call me?" "Grandfather," Shen Miao answered meekly. Luo Shuiyin heaved a sigh of relief. Luo Sui and Shen Xian were different. Shen Xian pampered Shan Miao to the heavens, but Luo Sui was a strict father since young. Even she herself had some fear of Luo Sui when she was young. Now that Luo Sui was older, he was not as dignified as before, but the habit of scaring young ladies had not changed. She was afraid that Shen Miao would be scared, but fortunately Shen Miao's reaction was not that big. Faintly, Luo Shuiyin's heart was somewhat proud. Shen Miao's attitude made Luo Shuiyin sigh of relief, but at the same time, it made the surrounding people somewhat surprised. The young ladies from the Ding capital did not seem to only know how to cry and live extravagantly, and seemed to have some courage. Tanner was unconvinced as he whispered to the young youth, "Must be pretending not to be afraid." Chapter 424. The oldest youth with the best temperament looked at Shan Miao thoughtfully and did not speak. Luo Shuiyin then pulled Shan Miao forward to introduce her. Other than Luo Sui, the Luo family had two other sons, and they were Shan Miao's two Jujio, Luo Lianying and Luo Liantai. Luo Lianying's wife was Madame Yu, a gentle and honest woman. He gave birth to two sons, Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Shen Miao's second Jiu Shu Luo Liantai's wife was Madame Ma. Her maiden family did business and was shrewd, giving birth to a pair of siblings. The elder sister was called Luo Tan, and the younger brother was called Luo Qian. Luo Ling was Shun Miao's eldest Biao older brother. This Biao older brother was 18 this year and had a gentle and honest temperament, exactly the same as Madame Yu. When he saw him, he would greet him gently and politely and was a very considerate person. And second Biao older brother, Luo Sa, was 17 years old and also Luo Ling's younger twin brother. He looked at Shun Miao and snorted coldly before ridiculing, "Young lady of the Ding capital, can she withstand the sandstorms of the Shaochun city?" He was kicked by Luo Lianying. That Luo Tan was 16 this year and had some suspicions towards Shen Miao. Her attitude was not warm and was more curious. Luo Tan's younger brother was the same age as Shen Miao and kept sizing Shen Miao up. He had a round face and was somewhat picky. After greeting the Luo family circle of people and recognizing them, Luo Sui let Luo Shuiyin bring them to the residence first. The Luo residence was a place where a large family lived together, and they all lived in harmony and love. The Shen family was settled in the courtyard that Luo Shuiyin had before she was married, so they could stay there. When the servants went to tidy up the room, everyone talked in the hall. After the initial excitement, it was time to get down to business. The Luo family and the Shen family were different. When the Shen family was in the Ding capital because Shen Gui and Shan Wan took the path of civil officials and was different from Shen Xian, naturally there would not be any discussions in court. In addition, they weren't blood relatives to begin with, and there was a layer of separation between them, so these private matters were even less likely to be brought up. The Luo family was different as they were all one family. Not only Luo Lianying and Luo Liantai could listen, Luo Ling and the other juniors could also listen, and even the females could listen. After Shan Xian's family came, they naturally wanted to listen to it. Yin'er, what plans do you have for the future after returning to the Shaochun city? Luo Sui asked. Shin Xian had previously written a letter to inform about the matter of his tiger tally being taken away and retreating to the Shaochun city. It was just that they were too far away at that time to discuss it. Now that they were right in front of him, he had to ask about it. Luo Shuiyin smiled and said, "Why does father ask like this? Since one came to the Shaochun city, naturally one should live well here." Regarding the matter of reviving the Luo family's army, Luo Shuiyin and Shun Xian still did not know how to tell Luo Sui. With Luo Sui's inflexible character, he would need some grinding. Third younger sister. It was Luo Lianing who opened his mouth. He glanced at Shin Xian and hesitated for a moment before asking, "But the Shin family army was taken in just like that. Is there really no turning back?" They were generals, so they understood the significance of an army to a general. Shin Xian had been on the battlefield for so many years, and it was not easy for him to suddenly be an idle ordinary person. If it was them, they would also be indignant. Shin Xian cupped his hands and said, "Eldest brother, rather than complaining, it is better to let nature take its course. The Shaochun city is also very good. I also want to spend some time at the place where Shuiyin lived." Hearing that, Luo Sui looked at Shin Xian a few more times, and the serious expression on his face eased up a little. "It is rare that you have changed your temperament." Everyone was clear about Shin Xian's fiery and straightforward temperament, so for him to say such peaceful words was indeed out of everyone's expectations. Shin Miao looked at the Luo family's different expressions and suddenly asked, "Grandfather, one heard that there are 2 Ju at the Shaochun city's border." Chapter 425. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly became silent. A moment later, Madame Mari acted. She was a straightforward person and said with a smile, "Jiao Jiao, don't be afraid. Those Turks are outside the city and don't dare to come in. Even if they come in, our Luo family soldiers can chase them away. They've been safe and sound for so many years. There's nothing to fear." Shin Xiu also thought that Shin Miao was afraid and softly comforted. Junyang said correctly, "Jiao Jiao need not be afraid." Shin Miao's eyes drooped down. The Shaochun city was a small place at the borderlands, and in the borderlands, there would always be nomads invading. The Turks in the east were one such group. These Turks were physically strong and had capable horses, making them extremely fierce in battle. If they were to fight with real swords and spears, Ming Qi's side would be at a disadvantage. But because the Shaochun city was easy to defend and hard to attack, coupled with the Luo family's prestige, these 2 Ju dared not advance and only dared to harass at the borders. Every year from August to October, the grasslands where the 2 Ju lived would be dry, and the 2 Ju would come to the Shaochun city to snatch things. All he had to do was chase these small fights away. The commoners were used to this, so they didn't take it to heart. But Shin Miao remembered that in this year, a major event happened in the Shaochun city. She nodded her head and nonchalantly said, "The Luo family army is as brave and fierce as father's Shun family army. In that case, if the 2 Ju were to attack the city, one fear that they would be able to resist." Luo Sui's expression stiffened and Luo Lianying's and Luo Lian Tai's expression did not look good either and could be said to be somewhat embarrassed. When there was no opponent, the Luo family would not be able to cope with such a huge expenditure of troops and horses. Moreover, Emperor Wen Hui in the Ding capital simply did not care about the Shaochun city. Thus, after so many years, the Luo family's army was no different from dispersing. The officers and soldiers went home to farm or do business. The Luo family army that was left behind was just a bunch of loose traders. Other than going to the border every year to intimidate the Turks, he basically did nothing else. Comparing the Luo family's army with the Shun family's army was simply slapping the Luo family's face. Luo Sa immediately turned hostile and looked at Shin Miao with anger. "What do you mean?" Luo Ling quickly pulled him back and looked at Shin Miao warmly. "Second younger brother's words are too serious. Biao younger sister must not lower herself to second younger brother's level. Those from the Ding capital are indeed different." Luo Tan's mouth twitched. "We've lived here for so many years without any problems, but cousin is always afraid of this and that. Don't worry, the Turks will not enter the city. It's already been so many years. Shin Miao gently smiled. What if one enters the city? Luo Tan did not expect that Shin Miao would refute and could not help but be surprised for a moment. Luo Sui, who was sitting on the high seat, did not speak. The Luo family's education of the younger generation was like this, to let them fight for themselves and discuss on their own. There were some things that one would only be able to find out more by exploring on their own. The elders just watched quietly from the side. Shin Miao's words just now had some meaning, but since Luo Sui did not speak, it was not good for Luo Lianying and the rest to speak, so they could only watch the younger generation speak. How can he enter the city? Luo Tin angrily retorted. Those Turks only want some rations and tools. Once the 10th month is over, the drought will be over, and they will not dare to act recklessly. After entering the city, we still have to fight. How can it be that easy? Shin Miao's expression did not change as she lightly said, only food and tools for more than 10 years. Don't you feel that it is too easy to satisfy? Everyone was surprised for a moment. Luo Qian's age was similar to Shin Miao, and he asked curiously, Biao youngest sister, what do you mean? If it was me, I would not be so satisfied. Shin Miao replied warmly, there are brave soldiers, strong horses, and retreating grasslands. All of these, as compared to the scattered soldiers in the Shaochun city and the broken weapons, are much better. Why not fight for it? If one does not fight, it is because one is not familiar with the route to the Shaochun city. But after exploring for more than 10 years, for such a small city, even if one only comes once a year and only goes to one place every time, the map can be drawn out. She tilted her head and smiled. When two armies confront each other, one side is fully prepared but do not take action. Is it because of the rules that have been observed for so many years and must be abided by? Who said it? Chapter 426. For a long time, no one in the room spoke. The two Jews did not have any ambitions towards the Shaochun city, and every time because of the lack of supplies, they would snatch things, and everyone was used to it. Who knew that Shin Miao's words today from another aspect, an aspect that they had never thought about before, awakened them from their dreams. Not bad. The Turks had everything, so why couldn't they have ambition? If the two Jews wanted to take over the Shaochun city, how could the people in the Shaochun city resist? Luo Sa's expression also slowly changed. He looked at Shin Miao, and even though his tone was still not good, compared to the anger just now, it had eased a lot. He said, then what do you want to say? I see that the Luo family's army is not as tightly gathered as the Shin family's army. Shin Miao said it politely. How was it not as tightly gathered as the Shin family's army? It was obviously a plate of loose sand. Seeing the flash of pain in Luo Sui's eyes, Shin Miao smiled gently. When one was young, one had heard from mother about the heroic bearing of Wai Zhu leading the Luo family's army into battle. Wai Zhu had never thought of restoring the glory of the Luo family's army. The glory of the Luo family army was restored once again. Everyone in the room sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan looked at Shin Miao with some disbelief. Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's eyes brightened. The younger generation would always look forward to unlimited glory, and the scene that Shin Miao described would at least greatly satisfy the vanity of the youths and females. Luo Ling and Luo Sa were older and did not show that eagerness, but there was still a trace of expectation in Luo Sa's eyes. Luo Sui looked at Shin Miao for a while and suddenly laughed. You this little girl, your ambition is not small. It is rare for a place like the Ding capital to be able to raise such a hard bone like you. His words were filled with appreciation towards Shin Miao. Luo Shuiyan and Shin Xian immediately felt honored. But it was only for a moment before Luo Sui sighed and said in an unclear tone, it is just that girl. To restore the glory of the Luo family's army, how would it be as simple as you said? Soldiers, horses, and rations all cost money. How could the Luo family afford it? It's useless to raise an army. Little girl, do you want to waste all the money of my Luo family on this? Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. But those soldiers were raised by the treasury's silver, like the Luo family's army that was far away in a small place. Emperor Wen Hui could rest assured and naturally would not allocate any silver for the Luo family to bear the expenses of such a troop. Yet, They didn't know who they should be dealing with and who they should be fighting against. It was indeed sad. The imperial court is not willing to give the Luo clan money because the Luo clan's army is not outstanding. But if the Luo family army's prestige was outstanding and they won the battle, His Majesty would take the initiative to send money to them in order to appease the various factions in the court. As for the enemy, Shen Miao smiled gently. Far away there is the Qin country and Great Liang. Nearby there is the Tuju and Xiongnu. Ming Qi never had a lack of opponents, and with the advancement of their military strength, naturally they would be sent to further battlefields. Grandfather, what do you think? Let's not talk about what she said, but the way she talked and smiled as she analyzed the various forces, and the way she smiled and tilted her head could be seen clearly. She was obviously a pampered young lady from a noble family, but she made people feel that she was a tenacious woman who had climbed from the bottom of society. Luo Sui suddenly got angry. He suddenly stood up and flicked his sleeves before saying coldly, "There is no need to mention the matter of reorganizing the Luo family's army. I do not agree. Shuiyin, bring them down to rest. There is no need to discuss this matter in the future." Finishing, he did not even look at the people in the hall and turned to leave. Luo Sui's anger was inexplicable, and Luo Shuiyin was also very puzzled. Shen Xiao touched Shen Miao's head and firmly stood on Shen Miao's side. "Younger sister is good." Luo Sa swept a glance over and whispered to Luo Ling, "This Biao younger sister is not simple." Luo Ling smiled and said, "Perhaps." Luo Tan's lips twitched. What is so great about just talking glibly? Even grandfather was angered. Luo Qian shook his head and his eyes stared at Shen Miao, who was talking to Shen Xiao. Not only glibly talking, she also looks very pretty. Older sister is prettier than you. Luo Tan glared at him fiercely. Chapter 427. The days in the Luo family was thus settled down. Shen Xian and Shen Xiao were masters that could not stay idle, and would train the soldiers at the simple and crude training grounds outside the Luo family's residence. Naturally, they were training the front line of the Shen family's army. Those frontline soldiers were the kitchen soldiers, and after being tormented by Shen Xian daily, they were miserable, and Shen Xian also trained till he was angry. Luo Shuiyin was busy visiting friends and relatives. The Shaochun city was the place where she lived during her childhood and teenage years, and there were many close friends here. Every day she would bring Shen Miao out to visit her old friends, and inexplicably, Shen Miao got to know a bunch of Furins. Initially, everyone served young Lady Jiao, who came from Ming Qi, cautiously, and the food she ate was the most elaborate. The silk thread was the most delicate. The snacks were made in different ways, and even the flowers and plants were trimmed more beautifully than before. In the past, those female officials who came to the Shaochun city from the Ding capital had some temper, and everyone was afraid that they would not be careful and not serve Shen Miao well. Who knew that after staying for a period of time, one would discover that the previous thoughts were superfluous. Shen Miao blended in very well in the Shaochun city and did not receive any special treatment. There would occasionally be hail in the Shaochun city, and Shen Miao was only somewhat curious and not afraid. After a long time, the Luo family gradually put down their guard against this Biao young lady. Among the 4 juniors of the Luo family, Luo Ling and Luo Sa had started to take up positions in the guards, and were rarely seen. Luo Tan and Luo Qian spent more time at home, and when Shen Miao gave her a mirror, Luo Tan shook hands with Shen Miao. As for Luo Qian, he had a lively temperament, and was like a grown-up Su Ming Lang, pestering Shen Miao all day to tell her stories of the Ding capital. Shen Miao did not need to think about Fu Xiuyi's matters in the Shaochun city, and her mind was much clearer. She treated Luo Qian as a younger brother. On this day, Luo Qian and Luo Tan came to Shen Miao's courtyard to look for her. The Shaochun city was not comparable to the Ding capital, and if one went to the Ding capital, one could still go shopping. The big and small shops would not be finished even after a few months, but the Shaochun city was small, and there was not much to shop after a few days. Shen Miao stayed in the residence, and Luo Qian and Luo Tan felt bored, so they came over to talk to her. Luo Qian was eating the jiangnan snacks that the kitchen made for Shen Miao as he said, "Yesterday I went to the drill grounds to watch older brother Qiu train the soldiers. Even though those soldiers were not good, older brother Qiu's martial arts were very high. And cousin Qiu's bodyguard Mo, I couldn't even last a few moves against him. Cousin, can you ask Cousin Chiu to teach me a few moves? Shin Miao smiled. If you want to learn, just tell eldest brother directly. He will definitely agree. Really? Luo Qian's youthful nature instantly made him happy. Speaking of which, it was strange. Most of the gentlemen in the Ding capital were arrogant, but because they had experienced too many things in their youth, they would show some slyness that was not commensurate with their age. However, the younger generation of the Luo clan was different. For example, Luo Qian was sincere and straightforward. He had the innocence of a young man, and it was easy for others to have a good impression of him. Biaomei, Luo Qian was also very close to this good-looking and docile little Biaomei, and had long regarded her as one of his own. He said, Qiu Biaomei's martial arts are really very good to look at. Is he the #1 person in the Ding capital? No, no, no. It should be the #1 person in Mingqi. Eldest brother and second brother's martial arts are the best among us but still lost to older brother Qiu's hands. Luo Tan, who had been flipping through the picture book, finally could not bear to listen anymore. She bit the tangerine in her mouth and rolled her eyes at Luo Qian. Are you stupid? So ignorant and ill-informed. Not to mention the Luo family's people. Not to mention that I am your older sister. Really shameful. Shin Miao was already used to Luo Tan and Luo Qian. These two siblings, bickering all day long. Sure enough, Luo Qian was not convinced when he heard it. What do you know? How am I ignorant and ill-informed? You mean that older brother Qiu is not the #1? Chapter 428. Southern Xia, Northern Shan. Luo Tan unhurriedly said. Shin Miao was startled. Luo Tan was already proudly shaking her head. Everyone knows that there are two great military families in Mingqi. One is Gugu and Gufu's formidable great General Shun family, and the other is the Xia family of the residents of the Marquis of Lin. An older brother Qiu is a talent of the Shun family, and one heard that the little Marquis of the residents of the Marquis of Lin is also a stunning talent. At that time Zhu Fu had the fortune to see that little Marquis of the Xia family once, and said that this child is not a person of the pond, and will one day soar to the 9 heavens. Maternal Zhu Fu. Seen little Marquis of the Xia family? Shun Miao asked hesitantly. Luo Qian also said, That's right. Older sister. Why do I not know? You only know how to eat, eat, eat. How would you know? Luo Tan rolled her eyes at Luo Qian and continued. One heard that in the beginning when the Marquis of Lin took the military strategy, one coincidentally saw little Marquis Xia in the tent. After Zhu Fu saw that little Marquis Xia, he sighed. Originally I wanted to inquire about it, but Zhu Fu told me to stay away from him, and said that little Marquis Xia is a dangerous person and not to be provoked. Shin Miao's eyes hung down. She did not know that Luo Sui had seen Xie Jingxing before. But Luo Sui was actually able to see that Xie Jingxing was not simple. Before she could break free from her own thoughts, she heard Luo Ten asking, youngest Biao sister, speaking of which, you also grew up in the Ding capital, so you should have seen that little Marquis Xie before? Shin Miao paused for a moment and nodded her head. What does he look like? Luo Tan grabbed Shin Miao's arm. Is it the same as the rumors say that he is a handsome immortal? Is he more handsome than older brother Ling? The older brother Ling that she was talking about was naturally Luo Ling. Among the 3 sons of the Luo family, Luo Ling was gentle, Luo Sa was violent, and Luo Qian was lively. It was just that because Luo Ling was the most gentle, he looked the most handsome. Shin Miao said, Not as handsome as older brother Ling, ah? Luo Tin released her hand, her eyes filled with disappointment. But I heard that the Xia young Marquis has a good appearance and his character is the most romantic. If a woman were to take a look at him, they would be intoxicated. You're even inferior to Big Brother Ling? Luo Qian looked at her gloatingly. The most important thing for a man is naturally his ability. What does it have to do with looks? Moreover, even if that little Xia Marquis is really looking for a wife, he would definitely not look for someone like you. Luo Qian smiled as he looked at Shin Miao. Naturally, one would look for youngest Biao's sister, this kind of fresh and gentle young lady. Luo Tan and Luo Qian immediately became a mess. Shun Miao held her forehead as she looked at the 2 siblings quarreling and felt somewhat helpless in her heart. She did not expect that Xie Jingxing's reputation would spread far and wide in the Shaochun city. Thinking about Xie Jingxing's trip to the northern borderland, he should have already arrived. This was his first time leading troops into battle as a young marshal. Although he knew that Xie Jingxing had the ability to lead troops into battle, but when he thought of the ending of this person's previous life, his heart could not help but shrink. Forget it. Shen Miao shook her head and drove away those inexplicable thoughts in her heart. In the past, she thought that Xie Jingxing was best at commanding troops and setting up formations. But now that she fought with Xie Jingxing, she realized that he was best at playing chess behind the scenes. That person's mind was calm and steady, so he must definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Time passed by in a flash. Luo Tan and Luo Qian sat at Shen Miao's place until evening. The skies started to turn gloomy. Once it was the 9th or 10th month in the Shaochun city, the grasslands outside the city would be dry, but there would often be heavy rain in the city. Different from the rain in the Ding capital, the rain in the Shaochun city carried the smell of sand and was incomparably fierce. The dark clouds almost covered the entire sky, and in a short moment, it was as if it was night time. Luotan looked at the sky and said, "Not good. One fear that there will be hail again." Chapter 429. Why haven't Uncle and the others returned yet? Luo Qian stood up as well and frowned. Although the Luo family army had dispersed, they still needed people to guard the city. On normal days, Luo Lianing and Luo Liantai would be working in the guards, and when Shen Xian came, he would bring Shanxiu along to help. On the other hand, he was supposed to return to the mansion for dinner in the evening, but he had yet to return at this time. Shen Miao looked outside and suddenly thought of something as her face changed. Luo Tan saw that Shen Miao's expression was not right and thought that she was afraid and felt somewhat strange in her heart. "Bao youngest sister, are you afraid of hail? There was one a few days ago, and you weren't afraid then. Why are you afraid now?" Speaking till here, he patted Shen Miao's shoulders. "Do not be afraid. We have lived here for so many years, and there would often be hail at this time of the year. Don't be afraid." Shen Miao did not get better because of her comfort, and her expression became uglier. As such, even the carefree Luo Qian also felt that something was wrong. He looked at Shen Miao doubtfully. "Why is Biao youngest sister so nervous? Is it because you are worried about Gufu?" "It's okay." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard someone calling from outside. It was the Luo family's manservant. Because he ran too fast, he even tripped. He said, "Young master, young lady, Lady Biao, Madam wants you to go to the hall quickly." Luo Tan was stunned and frowned. What happened? The two Jew came to snatch things again. So Master brought the two masters and General Shan to the grasslands. The two young masters are still in the mansion, and the weather is about to change. "Miss, please hurry to the main hall." Although the manservant was a little anxious, his attitude was not flustered. It was obvious that this had happened many times, and he seemed to have some experience. Luo Tan angrily stomped her foot. "Damn Turks!" Luo Qian said to Shen Miao, "Biao youngest sister follow us in first. It will be all right." At this time, he did not forget to comfort Shen Miao. Shen Miao nodded her head. When they reached the front hall of the Luo residence, there were already quite a number of people gathered there. Both Madame Yu and Madame Ma were in the hall. When they saw the three of them, they heaved a sigh of relief. Most likely Madame Ma was afraid of scaring Shen Miao, so she walked over to Shen Miao's side and pulled Shen Miao's hands. Jiao Jiao had not seen such big hailstones before. "It is all right. Later we will talk in the hall." After so long, Jiao Jiao had never told us about the matters in the Ding capital. However, he did not mention anything about the Turks at all. Madame Yu's temperament was a bit gentler, so she also smiled and said, "That's right. Let's eat lamb stew tonight. I wonder if Jiao Jiao will like it." The Shaochun city was adjacent to the grasslands, and when the two Jew did not come to rob, they would use cattle and sheep to exchange for some daily necessities. Cattle and sheep were born sturdy. After slaughtering the fresh sheep, they cut the mutton into thin slices and set up a small pot. The thin and plump slices were almost cooked as soon as they came into contact with water. Then, they were dipped in a little spicy sauce. Previously, Luo Tan wanted to let Shen Miao eat the lamb here but was afraid that she would not be used to it. She did not think that it would be brought up today. It was obvious that she wanted Shan Miao to be distracted, and not think about other things. Shen Miao smiled gently at Madame Yu. The Luo family always released their goodwill to the greatest extent. The two Jews' nest was in the depths of the grasslands, and every time there was a pursuit, the Luo family's army did not have enough manpower. It required all the able-bodied males of the Luo family to move out in full strength. But this year with Shen Xian and wife, it was better. Shen Xian, Luo Shuiyan, Shen Xiu, Luo Lian Ying, and Luo Lian Tai all went, and even Luo Sui also followed. In the Shao Chun city, only the Luo family could guard the commoners. Originally Luo Ling and Luo Sa also wanted to go, but since Shen Xian and the rest went, Luo Ling and Luo Sa stayed in the Shao Chun city. The sky outside was already dark and Luo Tan bit her lips tightly, looking somewhat sullen. Her own home was being robbed by others every year. No matter what, she would not be happy. Chapter 430. Most of the people in the hall were females, and there were also some maids and servants. Bai Lu and Shuangjiang quietly handed the snacks that were left in the afternoon to Shen Miao for her to eat. The pot was already set up in the hall, and the kitchen was cutting the lamb. The soup in the pot started to emit an aroma, but at this time no one was in the mood to be happy. Luo Qian felt somewhat hungry, and when he saw that there were some snacks beside Shen Miao, he walked over and sat down beside Shen Miao and picked up a snack to eat. Shen Miao looked at him without blinking. Luo Qian was somewhat baffled by Shen Miao's gaze and finally scratched his head and could not help but speak. "Biao, youngest sister, why are you looking at me for? Are you afraid?" The place where both of them sat was far away from Madame Yu and the rest, so ordinary people would not be able to hear their voices. Shen Miao said, "Older brother Qian, why is Wai Zhu not willing to reorganize the Luo family's army?" Luo Qian was startled. That day when Wai Zhu heard me speak, he was angry. One feared that it was not because there was no money to support the Luo family's army. "Older brother Qian, can you tell me the reason?" Luo Qian's eyes looked around and avoided Shen Miao's eyes as he stammered. "What reason is there? It is just that there is no money." Biao, youngest sister, should not think too much. Without money, how can one build the Luo family's army? Shen Miao looked at him quietly. Her eyes were bright and moving, full of clarity, without the slightest bit of emotion. However, it was this kind of frank expression that made people unable to resist. It made people feel that lying in front of such a pair of eyes was blasphemy. Luo Qian was after all a lively youth, and his relationship with Shen Miao was not bad, so he finally gave up and said softly, "Biao, youngest sister, this matter is something that no one in our residence dare to say. But since you are one of us, I will tell you about it. Even if you know about it, do not tell others. If my father and mother knew that I told you about it, I will definitely receive a beating." Shen Miao nodded her head. "Actually, you are not the first person to mention the matter of reorganizing the Luo family's army." Luo Qian said, "The time when the Luo family's army really started to decline was not long after youngest Gu was born. At that time, the Luo family was already declining, and Zuzu's ambitions were not fulfilled. When Zuzu saw that he was depressed all day, she proposed to revive the Luo family's army. Grandfather already had this idea in his heart, and as soon as grandmother said so, he immediately made preparations. But at that time we were still short of money, so grandmother said what Biao Mei said to grandfather that day, that the army should be famous. As long as we win the battle, His Majesty will notice this army and naturally allocate the money. At that time, the problem of the silver would be solved. Thus, my grandfather volunteered to be the commander to fight a border war." Luo Qian sighed. "Biao, youngest sister, you should have already guessed what the result was." Grandfather's great defeat had almost become a joke. The Luo family's army was already in decline, and after suffering such a heavy blow, they were even more unable to recover. Most importantly, when grandfather was leading the army to war, grandmother was seriously ill. In order to make grandfather feel at ease, grandmother didn't let her family tell grandfather the news. By the time grandfather returned from the defeat, grandmother had already passed away. Grandfather always felt that if he didn't fulfill his promise to grandmother, he wouldn't be able to face her even if he died 100 years later. After so many years, he did not reorganize the Luo family's army because he did not have the courage to face the past failures. Luo Qian put down the snacks in his hands and looked at Shen Miao. "Biao, youngest sister, I know that you want to let the Luo family's army regain its prestige, but our Luo family does not seek to be famous. My mother said before that one must cherish the people in front of one. Just like grandfather, if time could be turned back, he would definitely not fight that war and choose to stay by grandmother's side. So if one can make grandfather happy, even if the Luo family's army continues to be depressed, it would not matter. Chapter 431. Xin Miao looked at Luo Qian, and her heart was slightly surprised. She did not think that with Luo Qian's carefree temperament, he would actually say such words. The Luo family's righteousness, kindness was indeed not fake. But to know of such a past event from Luo Qian's mouth, one's heart also sighed. This was the worst defeat of the awe-inspiring great general's life. Was it because he was overconfident, or because he didn't have any confidence in the outcome? Xin Miao thought that it was not that Luo Sui could not afford to lose this battle, but the one he could not afford to lose was none other than Luo Foreign. Abandoning his ill wife and choosing meritorious service, the final outcome ruthlessly slapped him in the face. No wonder that when Xin Miao said those words that day, Luo Sui's face instantly changed color. One fear that the most hidden pain in this general's heart had been evoked. But if one is depressed like this, would Wai Zumu be happy? Xin Miao suddenly opened her mouth. Ai. Luo Qian turned his head to look at her, and was somewhat puzzled. Xin Miao smiled gently. If I admire a person and he is a hero, one would hope that he would wear the treasured sword that he should wear, ride the fierce horse that he should ride, lead the bravest soldiers and obtain the most proud meritorious service. I am not willing for him to suffer grievances. Now that Wai Zumu is suffering grievances, if Wai Zumu knew, would she not feel heartache? If it was me, I would feel heartache. Luo Qian was somewhat confused by Xin Miao's words. Not to mention anything else, to say admire in front of a male like him made him somewhat aghast. Madame Ma also said that Xin Miao was a young lady from the Ding capital and was delicate and timid. One must take good care of her as she would have a shy temperament. Now it seemed, where was there any shyness? One feared that she was more magnanimous than Luo Tan. Just as he was thinking, one heard a servant shouting outside, "Eldest young master, second young master is back." Everyone looked towards the entrance of the hall, and it was the two brothers, Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Most likely it was about to rain outside as the air was somewhat humid. Both of their clothes seemed to be stained with water. Luo Ling and Luo Sa had just returned from the garrison and looked somewhat travel-worn. Madame Yu first instructed the servant to pour tea for both of them, and Luo Sa downed it in one gulp. Luo Tan had already ran up and asked Luo Ling, "Older brother Ling, how is it outside? Seeing that it's going to hail, I've already told the commoners to go back to their houses to hide. Everything is prepared outside." Luo Ling replied with a smile, "Second younger brother, and I will guard here for the night after returning. Our hall is sturdy, so there's nothing to be afraid of." "What happened to Dad, Uncle, and Grandpa?" Luo Tan asked relentlessly. Luo Sa frowned and said, "He's not back yet." Luo Tan still wanted to say something, but when Luo Ling saw Luo Qian and Xin Miao walking over, he quickly said, "It is nothing. Most likely one would be somewhat busy tonight and would return tomorrow." He changed the topic. "It smells so good. Are we going to eat hot mutton tonight? Cousin has never eaten this before. I don't know if she is used to it." Xin Miao walked in front of Luo Ling. Luo Ling was 18 this year, and his brows were as handsome as Luo Lian, but his temperament was as gentle and considerate as Madame Yu. It was a far cry from Luo Sa's violent and unruly temperament. Xin Miao said, "Older brother Ling, is the city guards deployed?" Luo Ling was surprised for a moment, as he did not expect that Xin Miao would ask about this, and replied, "It is all arranged." "How many people are there in the city guards?" Xin Miao asked. This time Luo Sa's gaze landed on Xin Miao. When these juniors spoke, Madame Yu and Madame Ma were far away. Luo Qian asked, "Why is youngest Biao's sister asking this for?" "Tonight there will be hail, so most likely no one will enter the city. 30 in the east and 30 in the west. In addition to 10 in the north, there are a total of 70 people." Luo Ling patiently answered. Chapter 432. Is there usually so many people? Shin Miao asked. After hesitating for a moment, Luo Ling said, on normal days there would be more people, but today father and the rest had transferred them away, so there are not many city guards left. However, as long as nothing happened in the city, 70 people would be enough. The weather is not good tonight. Little brother is right. No one should enter the city. The Luo army only had so many people that it could use. In pursuing the Turks, it was only natural that it take all the useful people with it. The remaining city guards seemed to be stretched thin. Of course, the Shaochun city had been safe and sound for so many years. The city guards would at most help to capture fugitives or thieves, and there was not much use. Luo Sa stared at Shin Miao for a while and suddenly said, "You are afraid that the two Ju will attack?" Everyone was taken aback by his words. Luo Tan's jaw dropped. Luo Qian asked, "Second brother, what are you talking about? Why would the Turks attack?" Luo Sa sneered and stared at Shin Miao's eyes without blinking. Didn't Biao youngest sister say it on the day you came? The two Ju have ambition and strength, so why can't they attack? Is this what you're afraid of? Luo Sa's character was somewhat aggressive and facing his sharp gaze. Shin Miao nodded her head. Correct. What I am afraid of is this. How is this possible? Luo Tan said, not to say if what you said will happen. Today father and Gu Fu had gone to the grasslands to pursue the two Ju. So how would the two Ju be distracted to attack the Shaochun city? If he was really ambitious, wouldn't it have been better to find an opportunity before? Luring the tiger away from the mountain. Not only the Ming Chi people would use it. Shin Miao said lightly, even though the two Ju are nomads, they are not fools. After living with the people of the Shaochun city for so many years, do you think that you would not learn something? As long as the Turks aren't fools, they would have learned it long ago. Shin Miao's uncharacteristic cold attitude made the few of them somewhat surprised. After a moment of silence, it was Luo Ling who spoke first. Youngest Biao's sister, is this your own guess, or where did you hear this news? Shin Miao had always been worried that the Turks would attack the city, and today she was acting so strangely. Everyone noticed this point, and as long as one was not a fool, they would be able to see that something was wrong. Simply being afraid was one thing. But if he got other information from somewhere else, it would be another matter. Intuition. Intuition? Luo Sa was not angry but laughed. Biao youngest sister, this is not the time to joke. Could it be that both older brothers have been in the city's guards for so many years and do not know the logic of taking preventive measures? Shin Miao's expression was slightly restrained, and the meekness in her eyes was restrained, and gradually there was determination. She said, if the Turks really attack, we can prepare in advance and naturally everyone will be happy. If they did not attack, the Shaochun city would be spared from the calamity. Would it not be a good thing? Could it be that bad things had to happen in order to be prepared? If they don't even understand this, it's no wonder that the Luo family is on the decline. Luo Sa was furious. Luo Tan's and Luo Qian's faces were also not looking good. It was Luo Ling who stared at Shin Miao for a while, and his expression did not change, and was as gentle as before. He cupped his hands towards her and said, Biao youngest sister is right. It is us who are slow-witted, but based on the lack of manpower of the city's guards, it is an irrefutable fact. Based on Biao youngest sister's opinion, what should be done? On the surface it was a question, but it was to ask her to solve a thorny problem and to test her ability. Shin Miao's heart was startled. This gentle Biao older brother was not as generous as he looked on the surface. She said, if it really come to this step, it is not possible for the manpower to increase for no reason. The Turks came prepared, and we are naturally not their opponent. I am after all a female, and do not know martial arts. Rather than taking risks, it is better to protect myself. Older brother Ling, why not gather more guards at the Luo residence's doors to protect the Luo residents? If there is a problem, they would be able to resist for a while. When her slippery words came out, everyone was stunned. She spoke so vehemently, but at this moment, why did she show such a helpless look? For a moment, the younger generation of the Luo family did not understand Shin Miao's meaning. Luo Sa was the most oppressed. He wanted to get angry when he saw Shin Miao, but could not find a reason to get angry and could only sit at the side with a face full of anger. Luo Ling looked at Shin Miao meaningfully and said unexpectedly, then do as Biao youngest sister says. Everyone sat down in the hall again. One did not know why, but because of Shun Miao's words, the atmosphere became somewhat stiff. Even Luo Qian and Luo Tan seemed to be nervous. Only Madame Ma and Madame Yu did not know anything and were still instructing the chefs in the kitchen. It was until the sky was completely dark that Luo Ling's guards suddenly requested to see him. Luo Ling let him in, and that guard's expression was anxious as he whispered a few words to Luo Ling's ear. Luo Ling's expression changed and suddenly looked towards Shun Miao. Shun Miao was drinking tea leisurely. Chapter 433. Shun Miao was leisurely drinking tea. At this time, when the wind was raging outside, she was sitting in a corner of the hall and slowly sipping the hot tea that Jingzhe handed over. It was as if she was really a naive and innocent young lady who was waiting for the lamb slices at the back of the kitchen to be ready so that she could sit around and enjoy the hot lamb. Luo Ling's expression became somewhat serious. Luo Sa noticed that something was wrong with him and followed Luo Ling's gaze to look at Shun Miao. His face also sank a bit as he asked, "What happened?" Luo Ling did not care about him and did not instruct the guard what to do, but stood up and walked in front of Shun Miao. Biao youngest sister, step aside to talk. Cousin Ling, if you have anything to say, just say it here. Shun Miao put the teacup in her hands aside and looked at him with a smile. If something really happened, it would not be hidden. Seeing this, Luo Qian and Luo Tan also walked over. Madame Ma and Madame Yu noticed the commotion this time. They thought that there was a dispute between Shun Miao and Luo Ling, and at this time, they would naturally side with the female. Madame Yu immediately walked over and glanced at Luo Ling before shaking her head in disapproval. Ling, do not scare Jiao Jiao. Hearing this, Luo Sa sneered and said, "Who's scaring who? Big brother. What exactly happened?" Luo Qian was young and spoke without thinking. If he had any doubts in his heart, he would ask out loud. Luo Ling looked at Shun Miao, and Shun Miao smiled gently at him, as if she knew what he was going to say next. That calmness of grasping everything made Luo Ling slightly startled. A moment later, he sighed and said helplessly, "The city guards have sent news that the Turks. It looks like they're entering the city." "What?" Luo Tan exclaimed. She immediately realized that her voice was too loud, so she covered her mouth. As they spoke, the surrounding maids and senior servants were far away and did not hear clearly. But the greatest taboo in the world was to shake the morale of the army. They had gathered here to hide from the hail, but if the Turks were to learn that they had entered, the morale of the army would immediately fall into disarray. Even if there was no chaos because of Luo Ling and Luo Sa, at least there would be panic. Madame Yu and Madame Ma were from ordinary families and naturally did not have the ability to protect themselves. When they heard this, they were stunned. Madame Ma immediately said, "Ling Sa, shouldn't we get someone to protect Jiao Jiao and the others first? How long can our Luo residents resist? When will your father come back?" Even the smartest and most capable woman couldn't help but panic when faced with such a situation. As for Yushir, she didn't know what to do. However, she still subconsciously said, "Why don't we hide somewhere first?" Luo Tan's and Luo Qian's faces were somewhat pale. They had lived in the Shaochun city since birth, and even though they had heard Luo Sui's stories of the battlefield, but they always felt that it was something far away from them. The Turks never entered the cities, but the stories of what would happen to them once they entered the cities had no shortage of stories. Even if Ming Qi's own soldiers attacked a city, there would be a massacre, not to mention the two Jews' savage nature. Biao Mei actually guessed correctly. Luo Qian muttered. Madame Ma and Madame Yu were surprised for a moment before Madame Yu looked at Shun Miao. Jiao Jiao, guessed correctly? Biao Mei previously mentioned that the two Jew might attack the city. Luo Ling looked at her, and an unclear light flashed in his eyes. Biao Mei must have a countermeasure. If one does not mind, please inform me. Now is the time of life and death. Luo Ling's attitude was extremely low, or it could be said that the Luo family would not have the arrogant thoughts of others. Otherwise, with Luo Ling's seniority and status, there was no need to be so humble to consult a young female. Chapter 434. When Luo Ling's action landed in Madame Ma's and the rest's eyes, they were extremely shocked. Luo Ling was the most outstanding among the younger generation of the Luo family, and now he actually wanted to consult Shin Miao? Shin Miao said, older brother Ling also did not tell me what is the situation now. Luo Ling waved his hands to summon the guard who came to report. When the guard saw Luo Ling going to ask an unfamiliar young lady, he was somewhat surprised but still honestly replied. Replying, young lady, someone from the guards saw the two Jew gathering at the city gates. The general has not returned, and the city guards do not have enough manpower. At the end, he was so ashamed that he could not speak anymore. Shin Miao did not have time to bother about his awkwardness and asked instead, is there a lot of manpower or not? Are the two Jews scattered or united? Luo Sa's eyes were like torches as he stared at Shin Miao. That guard thought about it and said, there are a lot of manpower. Even though they are scattered, there is the sound of horses. There should be reinforcements. The few of them suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Luo Ling's and Luo Sa's expression became extremely ugly in a moment. If there was some fluke just now, at this moment they were really aware of the seriousness of the matter. Having horses meant that there was an army. The army that was able to contend with the two Jew on normal days was now fighting in the grasslands. At the moment, the Shaochun city did not have any real military strength, but at this time they caught up with another two Jew army. Shin Miao was right. It was a diversion to lure the tiger away from the mountain. These two Jew had become cunning and even secretly developed another army. This army might not be as strong as the one that Shin Xian dealt with, but to bathe the Shaochun city in blood, it was more than enough. Madame Ma and Madame Yu also realized that the matter was not good. Madame Ma said, why not call back all the manpower that can be used? No matter what, first protect your younger generation. It was the tradition of the Luo family since ancient times to let the younger generation leave first when there was an accident. It was to sacrifice the older generation and leave the hope to the younger generation. Luo Tan's eyes immediately turned red and pulled Madame Ma's sleeves. Mother, I do not want. If it is really not possible, then fight it out with them. Luo Qian gritted his teeth, and there were two flames of anger in his eyes. In any case, we have the blood of generals flowing in our bones. Could it be that we are still afraid of those barbarians? Take the sword. At most, we will die together. Qianer, Madame Ma said angrily, what nonsense are you talking about? Do you want to die if you go out now? If it really doesn't work, Big Brother and I will cover your escape. It was Luo Sa who opened his mouth. He said solemnly, there are still carriages in the residence. Escape from the back gate of the city. There is a section of mountain road. We will not be discovered even if we hide. No. Shin Miao interrupted them. Luo Sa looked at her. Do you have a way? Shin Miao shook her head. A trace of disappointment flashed across Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's faces at the same time. They did not know why, but they felt that Shin Miao seemed to have a lot of ability. Even though she looked delicate and noble and had tender skin, but every time they spoke to Shin Miao, that kind of peace and confidence made one feel at ease as if they had a backbone. But now that Shin Miao could not think of a solution, Luo Qian and Luo Tan were somewhat desperate. Then do as second younger brother says. Luo Ling said, first send you to the horse carriage and all the guards in the residence will follow you. It is enough to leave second younger brother and me in the Luo residence. I will go with second younger brother to the city guards. This was to sacrifice the two brothers to fight for time for the others. Madame Yu's tears fell in a moment and almost fainted as she pulled Luo Ling's hands. How can one let the two of you stay here? Madame Ma shook her head. We are one family. If we are to leave, we will leave together. This deadlock could not be resolved. Shin Miao shook her head and spat out two words, no. Chapter 435. Biao youngest sister. What exactly are you talking about? Luo Qian could not help but ask. Shin Miao swept her eyes across everyone and said, in the Shaochun city, the Luo family has the largest military strength. The leaders of the city guards are also older brother Ling and older brother Sa. The two Jew are also clear about this point. So if they were to really attack the city, in order to boost morale, they would definitely deal with the Luo family first. As long as the Luo family is destroyed, the citizens of the Shaochun city would definitely lose their fighting spirit and be captured. If I am the Tuju, even if I have to use all means, I will deal with the Luo family first. It is impossible for the Luo family to escape unscathed. Exposing the terrible reality without any concealment, Luo Tan could not help but tremble and looked at Luo Ling, eldest brother. Is what she said true? Luo Ling stared at Xin Miao. Correct? Luo Sa's anger suddenly rose. This cannot be done. That cannot be done. Since one cannot escape and the two Ju have brought troops over, why not fight it out with them? Our Luo family has never produced a coward before, so why would we be afraid of them? There is no need to be anxious. Shun Miao suddenly spoke. The hall was silent for a moment before Luo Ling looked at Shun Miao and softly said, Does Biao youngest sister have a brilliant plan? Cannot be considered as brilliant. Shun Miao's brows were calm. She was born delicate and pretty, and in the midst of all the anxious emotions, only her expression was indifferent. Everyone then discovered that from the beginning till now, Shun Miao had not shown any other emotions. The Shaochun city was at the borders and would panic when the two Jews suddenly entered the city, but Shun Miao was a pampered young lady who had been sleeping comfortably in the Ding capital, and was not surprised at all. The two Jews have brought their troops, but did not advance for a long time. It is obvious that they are hesitant and have some scruples. I think that after so many years, even though the Luo family's army had dispersed, the remaining prestige is still there and can still be some deterrence. Their hearts are hesitant and probe before advancing. Even the commander is not certain, so one can make use of it. Madame Ma and Madame Yu did not understand Shan Miao's words, but felt that Shan Miao's words were very reasonable, so they did not speak for a moment and quietly listened to her. Luo Sa frowned and asked, How to make use of it? Let's buy some time. Xin Miao lightly replied, My father and mother, Waizu and Jujiu are not ordinary people, and one think that they would soon discover that something is wrong here, and once they discover that something is wrong, they would quickly rush back to the Shaochun city. Before that, all we need to do is delay the footsteps of this end. But how do we delay it? Luo Tan had an impatient personality and impatiently asked, Based on what you've said, the Turks are so smart that they know that time is of the essence and will quickly attack. What are they afraid of? Just show them what they want to see. Xin Miao smiled gently. What they are afraid of is that the Luo family's army actually still have surplus strength. So let them see the surplus strength of the Luo family's army. Biao youngest sister. Luo Qin said anxiously, Where are we going to get the Luo family army now? Xin Miao smiled gently. This will require everyone's cooperation. But before that, one do not know if both older brothers believe in me? She looked at Luo Ling and Luo Sa. It was clearly a very gentle and humble attitude, but there was a faint hostility. Luo Ling looked at her seriously. I believe you. Outside of the Shaochun city's city tower, it was already very dilapidated, and there was a lot of dirt and dust accumulated over the years, which was the mark of time. There were generations of people here, and there were also generations of heroic generals who guarded the peace and tranquility of the Shaochun city. But just like how cracks would appear on the brick walls of the city, the once indestructible doors would gradually decay. At this moment on the city tower, there were not many guards walking back and forth as they stared vigilantly at the gradually clearer sounds of horse hooves and torches. Big drops of cold sweat trickled down their cheeks. Chapter 436. The two Jews were savage by nature, and it was impossible for them, who had been slacking for many years, to go against them. And from the movements, there were quite a number of two Jews. The fear was mutual, and in a moment, the footsteps of the city guards became much heavier. Just when the people not far away were ready to move, someone from the city guards suddenly shouted, What is that? Even the sound of the heavy rain in the rainy night could not cover the surprise in the words. Everyone looked back and saw that in the Shaochun city, one did not know when large and small torches had appeared. These torches were densely packed and accompanied with the sound of the sky shaking noises. If one listened carefully, there was even the sound of horses. When the two armies confronted each other, naturally there would be spies who climbed high to inquire about the news in the city. The city guards standing at the city gates could see it, and the two Jew spies outside could also see it. Those inexplicable men and horses that appeared were especially clear in the rainy night, and the sky shaking shouts along with the messy sounds of the horses galloping on the ground, accompanied by the wind and rain. There was an unstoppable magnificence of thousands of troops and horses. It is the Luo family's army. It is the Luo family's army. Someone from the city guards shouted and almost kneeled down in joy. The Luo family's army has regained its glory. The 100-year-old Luo family had been declining for many years, and the Luo family's army that remained in these years were all small businesses. The sudden shout made everyone recall the invincible grace of Luo Sui's army in the past. It was as if there was a new hope, and the morale soared in an instant. The few men and horses in the city guards pulled out their swords and looked around. The blood and heat in their bones seemed to be ignited, and the shouts from their mouths, along with those inexplicable men and horses in the city, rushed towards the Milky Way. The first drumbeat of energy, the second weak, and the third exhausted. This sudden surge in morale, and the sudden appearance of more men and horses with the name of Luo family, obviously shocked the two Jews. The Turks angrily communicated with each other, and the soldiers paused, not daring to approach. After 2 hours of this stalemate, the Turks began to sense that something was wrong. Suddenly, the sounds of fighting came from outside. This time, it was a real army. Shin Xian and his men had returned. Even though the two Jews' men and horses were spirited, but they were not as experienced as Luo Sui and Shin Xian, who had been fighting on the battlefield for many years. Their formation was at a disadvantage, and they were quickly defeated. In the Shaochun city, at the entrance of the Luo residence, when Luo Ling heard that the soldier in front had returned to report, he then heaved a sigh of relief and respectfully bowed to Shen Miao. This time it is all thanks to younger Biao's sister. Biao's youngest sister is so smart. Luo Qin exclaimed. To think of such an idea. Shen Miao let Shin Xian gather all the useful people in the residence, and then gather the commoners on the streets, and lit all the torches that could be used. One person held 2 torches, and then let the blacksmiths use horseshoes to imitate the sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground. The commoners of the Shaochun city also knew that it was a critical moment of life and death, so they pretended to shout like the soldiers. In addition to the strong wind and rain that night, it was more than enough to deceive the two Jews outside. When the two Jews saw so many torches, they would subconsciously think that there were so many people. The sound of the horses' hooves and the shouts, in addition to the fear of the Luo family's army, would make them think that there was still a portion of the Luo family's forces guarding the Shaochun city. The two Jews had fear in their hearts and did not dare to blindly move forward. They tried to probe and stall for time. As long as they wait for Shan Xian's return, everything would be settled by Shan Xian and the rest. It looked simple, but in a critical situation, it was easy for one to lose their sense of propriety. So how would one think of such a method? Luo Sa's attitude towards Shen Miao also changed a lot. This time it is all thanks to you. Ever since Shen Miao came up with this idea, Luo Tan was filled with admiration towards Shen Miao. At this moment, when she saw that the plan was effective, she pulled Shen Miao's arm and asked, Biao's youngest sister, honestly confess, did you secretly read The Art of War? I remember that the military books in grandfather's study seemed to be what you said. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.